Hello, welcome back to week 2. SoonerScoop.com studios. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here. It's week 2. SMU coming to town. 5 o'clock kickoff on Saturday, 5 p.m. George, it's kind of hard to believe that, I know that we've said this before, but we wait this entire time, and then all of a sudden you look up and it's the middle of October. Week 2 for Oklahoma, coming off of a 73-0 victory over Arkansas State. It is what it is. We've talked about it for most of the week. We've talked about it on the Unofficial 40. We've talked about it here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. Make sure that you are telling everybody out there about us and following along throughout the journey that is the 2023 football season with Team 129. George, let's start here. Just kind of your overall thoughts as we enter into week 2, which is going to be a much more competitive football game, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot more. That's the biggest takeaway, right? You mentioned the 73-0 victory. That was great. It was fun to talk about for a couple days, and then you say, oh, look who's coming to town. And I think that you look at the schedule, and everybody's said it, right? First 5 games of the season until they get to Texas, that's when they really get tested. I think this SMU football team is a good football team. They could come in here, give Oklahoma some problems. They've got a really good offense. Rhett Lashley's done a really good job. He's in his second year at SMU, taking over for Sonny Dykes. They've got some talented players. We're going to go over a lot of them with Billy Embody, who we'll talk to in a little bit. But this is a dangerous SMU team, so I think we're going to find out. I like Oklahoma, to be clear, in this game, but I think we're going to find out a lot more this Saturday than we did maybe last Saturday.
No doubt about it. And I think that's where we'll start. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. Dillon Gabriel and Jackson Arnold were extremely efficient, extremely good through the air. Combined going 30 for 33 on Saturday against Arkansas State, 422 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air. They each had a rushing touchdown as well. Dillon Gabriel, though, that's kind of the talk right now is he goes 19 for 22, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in the first half. A lot of positives coming out of game 1 for Dillon Gabriel.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, 19 of 22. It's the most efficient he's ever been in a game. I think that's 86% completion percentage. That's the best of his career. So you're talking about a Dillon Gabriel that when he's good, he's really good. I mean, we've said it time and again. He's a top 10, top 15 quarterback in college football when he plays like that. So if you can get that kind of performance out of him, week in and week out, you're going to be winning a lot of football games. So I think Oklahoma's really happy with that. He seems to be building chemistry with his wide receivers. I know we talked a little bit about the deep ball with Andrel Anthony and kind of building that. And so I think that they feel really good about Dillon right now. And all the talks about Jackson Arnold, and he was great. I mean, he was perfect, in fact, for Oklahoma in his debut. But Dillon Gabriel's a guy that I think they all believe can have a huge year.
7 different wide receivers for Oklahoma made receptions in the opener, led by Jaquez Petaway. Andrel Anthony, though, that's we had heard about it throughout the preseason that he had kind of started to make a name for himself, especially on that deep ball. They weren't able. They hooked up for the 45-yarder to begin the game. Yeah. But I almost even think the biggest part about Saturday was he was getting open. He was getting tackled by the Arkansas State defensive backs, and that was somewhat pretty interesting as they move forward. If you would have told me that Jalil Farouk was going to be a very minimal part of this offense, it was I probably would have wondered was Oklahoma able to move the ball any? And that certainly wasn't the case on Saturday, George.
Yeah, no, I mean, Farouk is a guy, we've kind of talked about it. What's his role going to look like? I think everybody just penciled him in as wide receiver 1 this year for Oklahoma, but they've got a lot of talented players, guys that maybe their ceiling's a little bit higher. I mean, and you look at an Andrel Anthony, and I know his stats were not great at Michigan, but what Oklahoma's doing fits exactly his play style, his speedster mentality. He's one of the fastest guys on the team. He's somebody that runs really good routes down the field. He's going to be a deep ball threat. I anticipate he's going to lead this team in receiving this year. And Dillon Gabriel and him both talked this week about how they've been working since January on that deep ball. And obviously that's something that Dillon's really good at. It might be his best strength. So it's going to be interesting to see what Farouk plays. I think also they were pretty vanilla last Saturday. I think they'll get Farouk involved. You saw the one play that he did get the ball, makes a huge play, gets downfield. He was targeted in the end zone, kind of had a drop that I think Jeff Lebby said that he probably should have made that catch. But they just have so many guys, whereas last year they didn't. They had Marvin Mims, Jalil Farouk, and Drake Stoops, that was about it. I think it's going to be harder to get the ball, thrown your way when you have so many different guys.
Here is Dillon Gabriel and a host of Oklahoma offensive players talking about the performance and moving forward.
Yeah, it was just setting the tone for the season, what we want to accomplish, and taking it one step at a time. I think that's the most important thing. So I felt like we set the tone, but now it's rolling into week 2 and flipping the page and working on SMU.
I don't think there's a ton to read into that. I do think those guys operated again cleanly, and decision making was good. So guys made some competitive plays as well. So that was also good to see.
I think that you're seeing the best version of him. He's been a highly productive player. He'd probably be the first to tell you that another off season of film study and the work that he's put in, how he watches video and looks at an opponent, and the pre and the post snap diagnosis has probably slowed down incredibly strong for him. So I would say it's all those things, and then again I think it's the group of players around him or another. It's not all of them, but he's got a great group that are another year in the system, so they're better at what they're doing too. So everybody's on that proverbial same page.
Yeah, this offseason, we've been working at it, and it's fun kind of learning each other, but I think just the work we put in together and kind of seeing it come into fruition is a great deal, but knowing that that's just the beginning of it. So.
It was great because it was like a really big confidence booster, and whenever you go to somewhere new, it's always like I don't know what to expect kind of thing, but that early kind of set the tone for our team and just like how the rest of the game's going to go, and then we ended up scoring 2 plays later, so we firing on all different cylinders.
It's different, I think in a year a lot of things change, even game to game. Like you see, Jaleel didn't get as much, but he blocked his butt off on the perimeter, and you just never know who's going to get hot at what moment, and I think that's the beauty of what we do, just being able to plug and play with a bunch of different guys and produce. So that'll be time to tell for sure.
Saw top end speed. I was very familiar with Andrel. At my last stop, recruited him out of high school, so there was some familiarity there. And then when he got in the portal, have some really close connections at Michigan, was able to reach out and talk to some people inside the building that they didn't want to lose him. They loved him. They wanted him there. Felt like he was going to be a starter for them. He needed to change, wanted a scheme change, I think, as much as anything. And, again, got on the phone and everything checked out. So knew he was going to be a guy that played with really good length and really good top-end speed, and that's what we needed.
I'd say so, just with time, but also just within the scheme, just being confident in that. Looks may be deceiving at times, sometimes it's a lot going on and you're able to hide it well, but for me I just feel like just confidence in the preparation and year 2 coming out there knowing what to expect is just a great advantage for me, and the experience thing will continue to be something I pride myself on, just having to see a lot of guys and a lot of different looks, a lot of defenses. I think that is something I can use to my advantage.
Heard about the confidence that Nick and Jaden have started to develop a rapport with you. Mm-hmm. Is it almost easier to go back to them when they go out and do it in a game and you kind of trust them a little bit more?
Yeah, I think just in game, I think that confidence and in general just getting the taste. Once you get your feet wet and you make a big play or do something like that, I think the hunger, but then also the excitement and confidence comes in, and those guys have worked their butt off. And like I said, previous interviews, just those are guys who worked and have been here, but being able to showcase that and then get the opportunity to take advantage of it.
George, I think those last 2 guys are really important for this offense. I mean, you look at, and even the newcomers, Andrel, you wrote about him on Tuesday. You look at what they were able to do. Andrel Anthony catches the 45-yarder. Nick Anderson catches the 52-yarder. Jaden Gibson has the 33-yarder, and then he also has the touchdown from Jackson Arnold in the second half. I think that those are big developments for an offense that had a lot of question marks at wide receiver, but through one game, they've been really good.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson. They might have the 2 highest ceilings in that room. When you talk about talent, body size, those guys are elite. And to see them finally get out there, get some action, we saw it last year, right, with Jaden Gibson. He got some playing time, didn't use those opportunities. he comes in, makes 2 great plays on Saturday. Nick Anderson, was banged up last year. He comes in, makes the big catch down the field. He's a guy that I think can be a star. So it's going to be interesting to see what that rotation looks like. Like we said earlier, Eddie, I don't know if they have a superstar. I mean, Marvin Mims was spectacular in his 3 years
Maybe
in Oklahoma.
even a little underrated for what
Yes.
you look up, and I know that we've talked about it off of camera, but what he's about to do and what he's being asked to do for the Denver Broncos, you go, oh, okay, I knew he was good. I don't think that I realized he was that good.
Yeah, no, he's going to be the starting kick returner and punt returner for the Broncos. He's going to play, the wide receiver 2, I think, this week for the Broncos. So he's huge. And I don't know if Oklahoma has a guy as good as Marvin right now, but they have a lot of guys that are just really good wide receivers, and that's great for a position that really all offseason that was kind of the question mark, was who's going to be that playmaker, who can be that guy, where it seems like maybe they have like 4 or 5 guys that can kind of step up and fill that role.
Sure, and I mean Drake Stoops, before he gets injured, was well on his way to maybe having a 200-yard day. I mean, he might have damn well had a career afternoon had he not got hurt early or midway through the first quarter after he scored a touchdown, and after he had a couple of receptions. I think he was already at 56 for the day.
Wow.
So he was having a really good day, and it's going to be fun to see how that wide receiver unit comes together. Gavin Freeman, we've talked about him and everything that he's going to do with the ball in his hands. We're talking to Jaden Gibson after the game. Is basically just, we know that he's the one player on this offense that Jeff Lebby is going to draw up plays, and they're trying to get him involved.
Yeah, no, I mean he's somebody that I think he's matured a lot, right? He's a guy that we've talked about. Great interview. Somebody that I think I asked him, have you ever considered starting a podcast? Maybe we should get him on the show because he's such a great talker. But just a lot of guys that I think can make a lot of plays. And
LV Bunkley Shelton was active on Saturday.
He caught several balls. We didn't even talk about the tight ends. They didn't catch a lot of balls, but Blake Smith made a nice play. Cade McIntyre. We didn't even see Austin Stogner
wasn't very active. I mean, he was active. He just didn't catch any balls. And I think that is going to come as they open the offense up, as they, they were basically rather vanilla, I thought, on Saturday.
Yeah, 100%. They were. And I think that you're going to see them open it up. I think this weekend they're going to have to, right? SMU is going to score some points.
Sure.
And so Oklahoma's going to have to, put up 40, 50 points in this game. And I think they will. I think that they can score on this SMU defense, but they seem to have a lot of playmakers. We'll see how it progresses. Again, I mean, Andrel Anthony was running basically wide open all day.
Yeah.
I don't anticipate that's going to happen every single week. So, what can you do to make that happen? Can other guys make some plays down the field? Gavin Freeman, electric. I wrote about him. Story come out on Friday. But, he's somebody, too, that I think they're going to get more and more involved in terms of whether that's handing it off to him in the backfield. I thought you made an interesting point. He's still not really caught a touchdown pass.
Technically, he's not, which is, it's kind of crazy. I mean, he had the diving reception against Kansas a year ago. But yeah, technically, he hasn't caught a reception and then opened it up in the field. But you get those 3 big-bodied guys, or the 2 big-bodied guys in Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson, and then Andrel Anthony with his speed able to stretch the field. It's quite exciting to think what they could do underneath with all of that speed and all of those playmakers.
I mean, yeah, think about what they have underneath. I mean, Drake Stoops, who's one of the more experienced players, not only at OU, but in all of college football, super underrated, a guy that has kind of become that safety blanket for Dillon Gabriel, it seems like. Gavin Freeman, who's just Drake Stoops reincarnated, probably a little faster, and also is just lightning in a bottle right now. And then Jaquez Petaway, who
I was going to ask you about him. What were your first impressions of the freshman?
Super impressed.
10 targets, 9 catches.
He had the one drop. He had the one drop, which you don't want to see. But other than that, I mean, it was very clear they wanted to get him involved. They wanted to get him comfortable out there. He kind of talked about that, I think, on Monday or Tuesday this week. Kind of talking, saying, hey, he knew the ball was going to come his way. They had a game plan there, especially in the second half between him and Jackson Arnold. And that's a freshman to freshman connection that we're going to see the next, 3 or 4 years here at Oklahoma. But I think he's a guy, again, it's sort of like when we talk about the defense, all these young freshmen, these 4- and 5-star guys, they're going to ease them into this. And I think Petaway's the same way. He may not play a ton right now, but we might look up, down the road, they're playing UCF or whoever, and all of a sudden he has a breakout game, and he's a big part of this offense. I think we could definitely see that down the road.
Bob Przybyla wrote about Jaquez Petaway and kind of his pathway to get on the field as a freshman, early this season. obviously making. I know. Obviously, yeah. Let's make fun of Eddie. Hey, listen, I'm wearing a pullover today, and it's like 100 degrees outside because I don't want to get shamed by you out there on the online community, whatever it is. Real quick, before we get to Billy Embody, a great interview that we did, kind of previewing everything from the Dallas side of things, the SMU side of things. Just your overall thoughts on SMU. I think that this is going to be a much more competitive game, but at the same time, it's a game that I don't think that you should look up in the fourth quarter and Oklahoma was having trouble or having to pick up a couple first downs or get a stop and get off the field to be able to win the game.
Yeah, I thought we had a great conversation with Billy. Got to learn a little bit more about SMU. Ton of new transfers on both sides of the ball that you're going to see. Familiar names that you're going to hear that Oklahoma was recruiting. So they've got plenty of talent. I just don't think, and we talk about this term all the time, but I don't think they have the competitive depth. And this is where a game that competitive depth that Oklahoma's talked about should show up, right? I think SMU is going to be able to hang around maybe first and second quarter, but when it gets to that third and fourth quarter, Oklahoma should be able to pull away because they have more guys. They're able to stay more fresh. They're able to, bring in their third running back, fourth running back, whoever it is, up front. Defense should be able to have more rotation, get after the quarterback, things like that. So this is a game that Oklahoma should win, but it's a good test. I mean, they're going to test them through the air, especially Preston Stone, 5-star quarterback. He's going to get after it. He's going to let it rip down the field. He did that against Louisiana Tech, but he's also made some mistakes. He threw the ball in some bad areas, and Oklahoma has to make him pay. When he tested Gentry Williams or Woody Washington down the field, they need to make him pay. So I think that Oklahoma, this will be a really good test for them early in the year. But you're right, Eddie. If we're looking up in the fourth quarter and it's a 7-point game, that's not really what you want from Oklahoma.
I know how Oklahoma fans are. The text message groups, the DMs, will be quite lively if this is a game in the fourth quarter. But let's get to know the Mustangs. Rhett Lashley, his second season. Billy Embody from On the Pony Express joined us, a On Three brethren. Here is our interview, catching up with him earlier this week. And for this week's opponent preview, we welcome in Billy Embody on the Pony Express on 3.com. Billy, thanks for joining us. And it's still kind of getting into the swing of things with the start of football season, but SMU coming off a pretty good week one performance against Louisiana Tech. Preston Stone with 3 touchdowns, a career high. I think anybody that follows the recruiting rankings and the recruiting realms is going to be familiar with that name, and as well as a number of players for SMU. Just kind of recap everything that was over week one with Rhett Lashley's squad.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys. Excited about this one. Got a lot of OU buddies here in Dallas. A couple groomsmen of mine that are all excited for this one. But for SMU, they were able to take care of business against Louisiana Tech, 38-14. It was a game that saw SMU jump out to a 31-0 halftime lead. Former Sooner Corey Roberson actually had a pick six. I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit, but batted a ball down and returned it for a touchdown that got things going, 14-0. And really, it was one of those games where Rhett Lashley said afterwards that he was kind of stubborn, very vanilla in his play calling. And I kind of felt the same way. They were really simple in a sense, and that kind of made it a little choppy offensively. It was Preston Stone's first start at home and his first start since getting hurt at Tulsa last year. But he was able to connect on some big plays. He hit Jordan Hudson, a former 5-star wideout who transferred in from TCU for a 67-yard touchdown. He got R.J. Maryland, Nolan Matthews, Harris, 2 tight ends involved with touchdowns. And then they saw the run game kind of open up with L.J. Johnson, who's a Texas A&M transfer. Jalen Knighton kept chipping away, who came in from Miami. And defensively, that was the story, though, is that side of the ball. They were able to completely stifle Louisiana Tech outside of a 50-something yard touchdown reception in the third quarter where they just kind of took a bad angle. It was kind of a bang-bang post, and that was about it. Other than that, Louisiana Tech couldn't get anything going, and SMU's revamped defense really was the storyline. They've got a lot of new faces, but a lot of former Power 5 talent and other talent coming in that they feel really good about going into this year.
It seems like that's kind of the flavor of college football right now. You can basically kind of rebuild the roster through the transfer portal, and it seems like that's what Rhett's done as he enters his second year in Dallas. Is that about correct, that there are a ton of new faces, kind of what Oklahoma's familiar with?
Yeah, 25 new transfers this year. which is pretty unbelievable. It was, I think, depending on where you look for your transfer rankings, it was a top 10 class coming off of the offseason in terms of transfers added in. And they added, I want to say they have 7 new starters on defense. They have a handful of new starters on offense. But where this team has really been changed with the transfer portal is their depth on the offensive side in terms of the offensive line and the receiver position. The running back room's deeper. And then the defense is just night and day. They have 5 new faces at linebacker. Pretty much one player is returning, Jaquandis Burns, but he kind of was a backup, started 1 game last year. At the cornerback room, they have 2 new starters, Chris Meganson and Charles Woods. And then you also have safeties, a veteran group, Brian Massey, Brandon Crosley, as well as former Stanford captain Jonathan McGill. The defensive line, though, is probably the position group that I'm most impressed with. They've got a big nose tackle in Jordan Miller and a big defensive end in Elijah Roberts, both of who came in from Miami. And then they have returners like Devere Levelston and Elijah Chapman. They've got some edge rushers that showed some promise. They were really able to collapse the pocket against Louisiana Tech well. So this whole team is a lot of new faces, but they did get the majority of them in the spring. So this team's had a chance to kind of bond a little bit.
Billy, you just mentioned the defensive line. I think they had 6 sacks in that first game. Obviously, we were able to get after the quarterback. Defensive line coach Calvin Thibodeau, very familiar with Oklahoma. You mentioned Corey Roberson. Just those 2 guys, how have they fit in so far with SMU?
Yeah, Calvin Thibodeau is pretty funny. He was getting after some of the defensive linemen this morning at practice, letting them know if they weren't willing to go all out in some of his drills, that he's got a nice little book club that they can join instead. So he's got some of the better chirps, I will say that, from practice. But, when you look at Corey Roberson, a guy that didn't play for OU last year and gets this fresh start with a guy who recruited him, a guy who's really familiar with him. And, Corey's been through so much with the tornado and just some family things that have been going on as well. He lost his grandfather right before the opener for SMU just last week. So that had an impact on him. And I think it was pretty special for him to have that pick 6 and make that early impact, because he's a guy that came in with, the big name of Oklahoma coming in, but also hadn't really played in a year. And they really needed him to step up. They have another defensive lineman, Stephon Wright, who's injured right now, and they're kind of the similar mold guys. So Corey played a lot and made an instant impact. I think Calvin Thibodeau has done a really nice job of that group now that he's addressed it from the transfer portal. They were really thin. They pretty much played 3 guys last year, a 4th kind of, and they actually lost the 4th within the last 3 games of the season. So he had a thin group last year, but now that's been addressed and they've really changed it in terms of depth.
Talk a little bit about Preston Stone. He had the 6 games a year ago, got injured, made his first start last week in Dallas. I would imagine that everybody kind of expects him to take that next step. I would imagine there are a lot of high expectations for this Mustang offense as he kind of takes over in full at the quarterback position for Rhett Lashley.
Yeah, the expectations are really high. This is a coaching staff that really pushed their chips in all on Preston Stone. They had Tanner Mordecai, who could have come back. Really, he kind of tested the draft waters in terms of hearing what was out there and decided to come back to college. And I think they had an honest conversation. They said, thank you for what you've done, but it's Preston Stone's time, which is bold considering how much experience Tanner had gotten in the offense, kind of what he was able to do last year, especially. And so now it's Preston Stone's time. And for him, they've got a ton of receivers that have talent. They can rotate them in. They're trying to find that secret sauce in terms of who is the true lead guy. They don't have a Rashee Rice number 1 this year. They've got a bunch of guys that they're going to lean on: Jordan Curley, Jake Bailey, Roger Daniels, Moochie Dixon, Jordan Hudson. I mean, the list kind of goes on. And then they also have freshman All-American RJ Maryland at tight end. They have a ton of depth at running back and talent. And they've got 3 returning starters on the offensive line. They've got some talent they brought in on that front. So everything offensively kind of hinges on Preston Stone being that dude, like he was in high school. And so if they can't get that out of him, and I felt like game 1 with so many new faces, it was kind of a mixed bag. There were some really good moments where he showed touch. He showed the ability to put the ball where his receivers could go get it. He also distributed it really well. 10 different receivers caught passes. But then you also saw some of his deep balls float a little bit, and some just general timing issues here and there that they'll get cleaned up, I think, week 1 to week 2. That's usually when you see a decent jump. It'll be a tall task. Obviously, that OU secondary is pretty good, in my opinion, but they will, now that they've been through that game environment, that'll kind of help a little bit. Maybe going into week 2.
I think just from a standpoint of behind the scenes of what's happening in Norman, we talked to Brent Venables this afternoon at his weekly press conference. And George, I definitely got the sense that they feel like this is going to be a legitimately big test for what Oklahoma wants to be able to, or just to see how far along they are defensively. And, obviously coming over the last couple of years, really it's the last 6 or 7 years for Oklahoma defensively. It's been dreadful. It's been awful. This seems like this is going to be a really good test for them moving forward to see kind of where this whole thing is at. For SMU to stay around in the game, what do they need to do early to, I guess, maybe build momentum as the game moves on?
I look at last year's game against Maryland, and they were driving their first 3 drives. I feel like they finished all in the red zone, but they came away with 3 points on the road at Maryland. They had a 4th down conversion that didn't go their way, kind of simple pitch and catch that didn't happen. And then they got stuffed on one, and then they kicked a field goal on another. So taking advantage of the red zone, if they can get down there, is massive. And Rhett Lashley and his staff usually do a pretty good job of having their guys ready to roll offensively early on, being able to hit some of their staples of their offense. Again, he was really vanilla from what he said last week, so I'm intrigued to see what tricks they have in the bag. Rhett Lashley is, been a part of SMU when they beat TCU back in 2019, and that was a big, offensive showing for SMU, and they were able to, ride that to one of Sonny Dykes' best years at SMU. And for this team, they've got to have that swagger going in. I mean, that first drive, I think there was a double reverse pass. They were just chucking the ball all over the field, and then they really finished strong running the football. And I think that's kind of the recipe that Rhett Lashley wants to have. LJ Johnson came into the game a good bit against Louisiana Tech, but really just kept wearing them down. And that's a decent defense, at least for the group of 5 ranks. But, I look at OU's secondary, and SMU has to win contested balls this week. This is a receiver group that has speed. A lot of them have Power 5 experience. And some of them were super highly rated coming out of high school. It's not a talent thing. They've got to get their timing. They've got to make plays when they're there. And that's where you need somebody to step up. Jordan Curley is one of their top guys, but he dropped a really deep ball that would have been a huge chunk play against Louisiana Tech. You got to connect on those type of things. Offensively, they really do have the pieces to kind of hang around, but they've got to execute. I know it sounds simple and all that stuff, and or simplified in terms of the answer, but it's true. I mean, this team really did, outside of the Tulane game, beat themselves last year. They had turnovers in big games, and now I feel like they've addressed the running back room even more, which I think will even things out a little bit.
It's interesting listening to you mention all these guys' names. A lot of these guys are guys OU recruited. I mean, you think back to Jordan Hudson, Jalen Knighton, LJ Johnson, all these offensive weapons. It's going to be interesting to see what SMU can do. Billy, I want to ask you, I saw you tweet out this morning they were playing Boomer Sooner repeatedly at practice today. I mean, just what's their mindset heading into this game? I think they're 14, 15-point underdogs right now. And what are just the expectations for SMU regardless of the result on Saturday just for this season?
Yeah, that was a little fun. They went inside for the last 30 minutes of practice, and when I walked up, they were playing, so I just tweeted it out. It wasn't like the full 2.5-hour practice that they had going outside, but it's fun stuff like that. I know Rhett Lashley comes from the Gus Malzahn tree, and all that. A lot of those guys from that tree do stuff like that during some big road game weeks. But for SMU, I mean, this is a team that if we all follow NIL at this point. This is a team that has been really loaded up with transfer talent, in large part kind of thanks to NIL. Also some reunions with coaches on the staff, like the Miami connection, the Liberty connection, Calvin Thibodeau's connection to Corey, guys like that. but there's a lot of money being spent at SMU right now. I mean, not just on the ACC or, $200 million in the last few years on facilities, but there's a lot of NIL money being thrown around. And that's where the expectations of, we've seen SMU get into the top 25 here and there with Sonny Dykes. Rhett Lashley takes over. They go to a bowl game their first year. They play TCU competitive. They play Maryland very competitive. They have a decent team, but they haven't kicked down the door. This year in conference, they're fully expected to go make the AAC championship game in their last year in the league. They don't get UTSA or Tulane during the regular season. But in the non-conference, I mean, they're expected to – a lot of people are on SMU side expect them to beat TCU. They'd like to see them have a good showing at OU. That means getting off the bus and being ready to go, not kind of falling behind early like they did against TCU last year. And that was still a one-possession game in the end, and SMU played them about as well as anyone outside of Kansas State last year, and Georgia, of course. But this is a team that is kind of – they finished really strong last year, 5-2 down the stretch in the regular season. They just have some momentum behind them, and there's expectations that they should play well. They should be competitive. There's a lot of guys that aren't going to be afraid of this environment. Charles Woods, I'm pretty sure, has actually played in Norman or played the Sooners before. He's one of their starting corners. Jonathan McGill been to Oregon. He's been in some big games. There's a lot of guys that have this experience. All the Miami guys have played in big environments like the Swamp. So they've got some swagger about them. I think defensively, especially offensively, they're still kind of finding their footing. But that's just where you're at. When you invest as much as SMU has, there's an expectation to go out and at least be competitive. And a lot of people are only, feeling better about that, or they feel like they should see that because Duke went out and beat Clemson last night. So that's kind of where it's at, funny or not in some ways, but that's where the program is they should be competitive in these types of games.
We've talked about the defensive line. Who are some guys maybe on that back end of the defense that, Dillon Gabriel and the Oklahoma wide receiver core we have to watch out for, or maybe the Oklahoma fans should familiarize themselves with heading into Saturday evening?
Yeah, Chris Megginson is one of two starting corners. He comes from Liberty. He's played a ton of football and is a steady veteran guy that the SMU defensive coordinator, Scott Simons, and corners coach Ricky Hunley coached at Liberty when they were there. They had a top 25 defense in one of Megginson's seasons there. But they also have Charles Woods, who was a preseason All Big 12 pick last year before he got hurt and ended up wanting to play one more year of college football, and he wanted to do it back home in Dallas. They really view him when he's healthy as a true shutdown guy. He had a couple really good breakups. He had one pass interference call that he got called for against Louisiana Tech, but other than that, he was pretty good at blanketing their top guys. And they had Smoke Harris, who's probably one of the best G5 receivers in the country. And then you have the safeties. They usually play three safeties. They've got Brandon Crosley, who's was a former four-star when he came out of high school and ended up going to Colorado State, actually, funny enough, but transferred to SMU a couple of years back. Jonathan McGill is a former Stanford captain and starter there. He's played a bunch of football. He's back for his last 2 years of college football closer to home. And then Brian Massey is a really impressive looking safety just from a physical standpoint. He's got a couple kickoff returns for touchdowns in his career. He's back and healthy, wasn't last year. They also have depth behind all these guys. They've got Jalen Davis Robinson, an LSU transfer. They've got A.J. Davis, a promising sophomore they really like. They have Jahari Rogers, who transferred from Florida a couple years ago now. And then they also have Ahmad Moses and Isaiah Wacobia, who's a highly touted recruit coming out of high school, who had Texas, USC, places like that. And then C.J. Sanders is another guy they brought in this offseason. So the back end has some depth, and they did a good job against a veteran quarterback in Hank Bachmeier and a Louisiana Tech team that usually has athletes that can just run. I don't know. They're not on OU's level by any means, but it was like a good starting. It was a good appetizer, I guess, for what they'll face in Norman.
No doubt. I would imagine that right now it sounds like there's a lot of positive momentum on the field, and then with everything that has happened off the field, just kind of real quick before we let you go, give us a snapshot of just how crazy your last couple months have been following the conference realignment stuff, as well as the excitement with going to the ACC here moving forward.
Yeah, months. It was a year.
God, I'm not jealous of that. I can tell you that.
It's a year and a month and 20 something days because it started when I was on my honeymoon with USC and UCLA leaving for the Big Ten. But man, what a run it's been to get to this moment. And I mentioned earlier the $200 million in football facilities in the last couple of years that are either underway or been open. They've done it all on campus: basketball, swimming, golf, tennis. I mean, all the facilities at SMU are pretty unbelievable athletically. And that was kind of the piece that they needed to say, okay, we've got this all going. They need some winning to happen on the football field, to really kick that door down. They've been in the top 25. They've been a bowl team, but they've got to have this type of season that they expect to. They really, 10, 11 wins is really something they'd like to see. But following it, a lot of it was centered around the Pac-12. So it was just watching that complete train wreck for 11, 12 months of my life. You'd hear, okay, all right, we think there's a new proposal coming, and SMU's coming from the angle of, well, they've been told they're in, and they're just waiting to hear what the deal is that they've agreed to, join with. They know the Big 12 is no shot. Baylor, Tech, TCU blocking that, and probably others too. But they stayed in contact with the ACC throughout the last year, and that was the chairman of the board's true preference of where they'd end up. They did not want to go out to the West Coast. They knew that conference was probably trouble, but they had to find a way to get into the club. And it's going to take 9 years of foregoing TV revenue. But I was talking to a couple of SMU administrators over the weekend at the game, and they just said, look, we're already so far ahead. We've got all these donors that are going to float the programs and all of those things, but we've already got more donations. We know we're going to sell more merch, tickets. People are going to come into Ford. I mean, NIL donations are already up about 100K. And all the players already have their deals. So it's just kind of planning ahead at this point. But it's been a wild ride. It's a school that is committed to winning, which I think is important for people to know that it could be a joke or whatever that SMU bought their way in. But there are a lot of programs out there around the country that aren't committed to winning on the level SMU is. These people want to win so bad. They're throwing a ton of money at it to make it happen. And they've finally broken through and gotten to a conference that is pretty solid. So it's going to be a heck of a ride, both for football and basketball too.
I think it's one way to sum up SMU is that College Game Day sign. I don't know if you guys saw that. It said that SMU did NIL before it was cool. I mean, that program, they don't lack the ability to throw some money around. They never have. So it's going to be fun to kind of watch what they do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now I watched it this offseason. They still probably have a little hole at tight end because Baylor beat them out for Jake Roberts. They lost another highly touted wide receiver transfer to Baylor because Keytron Jackson wanted to go Power 5. There are little moments where you're like, okay, well, eventually they'll maybe make it. And I mean, the 2025 class in recruiting is going to be really interesting to watch. SMU is, very much, they've got their blueprint of high school and transfer, but it's going to kind of lean a little bit more back to high school now with the Power 5 or Power whatever it is conference logo on their chest. But like you said, it's there's no shortage of money. And when you combine that and kind of being in a major metroplex in Dallas, and a lot of the guys that, come through the program that really kind of take advantage of the alumni network and things like that, it's a good selling point. And I'll be very interested to see how it all goes, because they'll get an influx of talent based on this alone.
Very good. You making the trip up to Norman by 35?
Wouldn't miss it. Awesome. Absolutely. I'll be there.
We appreciate it. George and I will send over our Burger House orders, and you can just put those in the back of the car, and we'll meet up somewhere on Saturday.
I listened to the podcast after the game. I heard I need to bring my own food too. So
yeah. Well, if you want to just bring Burger House for everybody, I think that it would be very appreciated.
No, I'll keep that in mind. Send me the order.
We'll do. Billy, Embody on the Pony Express on 3. We appreciate you joining us here, previewing the OU SMU game coming up on Saturday. We will see you up here on Saturday.
Thanks, Billy.
Thanks a lot, guys.
You
appreciate
bet.
it.
See ya. It's quite fascinating, George, and thank you to Billy Embody for joining us. That was a great kind of a catch up, if you will. I am hoping for the Burger House run, but we need to get our order to him. I'm sure he's going to be headed up to Norman here pretty soon. It's going to be much bigger test. It is kind of funny though too. Much like Arkansas State, last week's opponent, you can reform a roster, and I know Oklahoma fans know this quite well. You can reform a roster through the transfer portal, and they've done just that. Yeah,
Billy said, I think 25 new players in the transfer portal, several new starters. You're just going to see a lot of different names, and it was interesting to hear him talk about how many of those guys play Power 5 football, especially on the offensive side. Some of these weapons that Preston Stone's going to be throwing to it. Jordan Hudson from TCU, he's a name you think of that Oklahoma recruited as a wide receiver, super talented out of high school. You think of LJ Johnson, the running back from Texas A&M, Jalen Knighton from Miami, who they recruited. So they've got a lot of weapons. I do think Oklahoma should be able to get after this offensive line. Again, that's what the emphasis was this offseason, was building up front, getting better on the defensive line. This is a game that you should see that take effect. And I know last week everybody's concerned Oklahoma only had 1 sack. They didn't get after the passer as much. The pass rush was non-existent at times. But Arkansas State did some things to prevent that. We'll see what SMU does. I mean, this is a really well-coached offensive football team in Rhett Lashley. So it's gonna be an interesting matchup. And again, I think Billy kind of hit it in terms of how many new faces they have and just kind of the confidence around this football team right now.
Yeah, it is certainly interesting the way that they were able to go out and kind of revamp their roster. They've done it on the defensive line as well. They went out, and I think there was a couple guys that followed Rhett Lashley over from Miami. They now make home in Dallas. And, if there was anything that SMU did extremely well in the season opener against Louisiana Tech, it was get after the quarterback and make tackles for loss. Corey Robertson had the pick 6, former Oklahoma Sooner. And so that's going to be a really good matchup for Oklahoma's offensive line and defensive line, both sides of the ball. Let's stick with the offensive line, though. Somebody that is quite familiar with the transfer portal. You have Walter Rouse starting at left tackle. Tyler Guyton's another transfer, as well as McCade Batower. That group played really well in week 1.
Yeah, no, they were solid. And we talked about it, Eddie. That's a group that we have high expectations for. I mean, I think we both said that it could be the best starting offensive line since the 2018 season when they went to the college football playoff and Kyler Murray won the Heisman. I think they won the Joe Moore Award that year. So you're talking about a really good unit, a really great start. I think it starts with a guy like Andrew Raym, right? I mean, you look back last season when he was banged up, that Oklahoma offense just wasn't the same, whether it was the snap not getting back there the right way. I mean, think about how many times, the tempo and the way OU runs its offense, it was just thrown off by a bad snap when Andrew Raym wasn't in there. But he's also, he's punishing guys in the end zone. You saw the one clip, I think, on the Marcus Major touchdown. He's a guy that I think is playing really good football. You mentioned Walter Rouse. He's been a lot better than I anticipated. I knew that he'd come in and be technically sound, but he's doing some really good things. Tyler Guyton, obviously a superstar, a guy that NFL-type talent. And then I think Savion Byrd is still kind of growing into his role. I think you're going to still see some Troy Everett rotate in there. He was the first offensive lineman to kind of rotate in. I think he got in even in the first quarter. So Savion's going to learn, the pace of play, get some more snaps. He hasn't played as much as anybody really up front. And then McCade Batower, you know what you're getting from him, a leader, a guy that I think he was a captain last week, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he was.
And Walter Rouse is one this week as well as Andrew Raym. So, I think it's a group up front that they feel really good about. Lots of leaders. But, I think as long as they can stay healthy up front, it's a group that I think they believe they can dominate.
It seems like there's a mentality, too.
Yeah,
there is a mentality there that I don't know if I don't want to say it hasn't been there in recent years, but it seems like this is a group that has really kind of accepted the challenge of the Bill Beanabo type of way is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think it's not that it hasn't been there. I think it maybe has not been there across the entire unit. I think obviously a guy like Anton Harrison had that mindset, right? I mean, when you're a first-round draft pick, you have to. Awanye Morris, had it at times, but I think that as a unit, they seem to be really cohesive in terms of what their mindset is, what they're trying to accomplish on offense, and that benefits everybody. The best Bill Beanbo offensive lines don't always have the most talented guys, it's oftentimes guys that work really well together as a group of 5 guys. So it sounds like they're really bonding, they're really coming together, and they're really experienced. Think about how much football Walter Rouse has played, Andrew Raym, McCade Mattower, Tyler Guyton got a lot of experience last year. Again, Savion Byrd's really the only one up front that doesn't have a ton of experience, and so he's working along. But yeah, man, I think it's a unit that's really coming together.
Here is Walter Rouse and Andrew Raym speaking with the media this week.
Oh, man, impressions. First off, it was just great to be out there, I think, after 9 months, going through training camp and then finally getting ready for that day, having fun, just being aggressive, being out there with the O-line. And I got to say, aside from being in the game itself, just being behind the tunnel, the Sooner schooner, and behind the horses running out, that's seeing the fans, the stadium, it's a sight to behold. And, I gotta say that was amazing. I can't wait for a night game against SMU this weekend. But yeah, I had an amazing time, had a lot of fun. First time I think I really had some fun at a football game in a while.
Big focus is details, but you know what I saw? I saw an O-line that's they were finishing. They were trying to get after people's butts. And we have a group of guys that really just wants to dominate people this year. We just got to keep working on the small things, the details, and it's going to take us a long way. I think it's just stemming off of last year and the performances we've been having. This is Oklahoma. There's a standard around here. We didn't hold up to it last year, so we realized we got to do things differently this year to hold ourselves to the standard that we're supposed to hold ourselves to.
He demands the best. He demands perfection, and I think that's one of the reasons why I came to OU, because of the type of coach that Beatonbow is. Like, he doesn't just want you to beat your man. He wants you to dominate him, like, with technique, consistently. And I just think that, he said we did a great job, but like I said before, we got to step it up. We got to keep going. We got to be the O-line that he knows that we can be. And I believe that we can be the best O-line in the country if we keep doing that week in, week out.
Oh yeah, no, we watch film, we see our receivers doing that stuff, we love it. It's something we've been needing for a couple years now, and our guys, like I said, we have an offense that wants to dominate people this year. And we're getting our hands on people, we're running our feet, and we're trying to match people.
Oklahoma ran for 220 yards against Arkansas State. It came rather easy. You had 5 running backs be able to carry the ball on Saturday. The one that you didn't see was Gavin Sawchuk, George, and I think that's where it starts getting interesting. I know that we liked a lot of what we saw out of Dalen Smothers. We liked a lot of what we saw out of Caleb Hicks, but Gavin Sawchuk's going to have a role in this offense. I think that we're past the point of what role. He's going to have a role. It's going to be really interesting here moving forward, how they start divvying up these carries, because I don't think that you're going to look up in the middle of October at the Cotton Bowl and they're giving the ball to 5, 6, 7 guys.
Yeah, no, and I think that Gavin Sawchuk's a guy that's a home run hitter, in my opinion. He's really fast. He was a track guy in Colorado, somebody that was one of the faster running backs in his recruiting class. I think he's going to come in and kind of be that guy. You saw it on Saturday. They had some really nice runs. I think their longest run was, 16 yards?
16 yards.
And who was that? Was that
Javonte Barnes?
Javonte Barnes. So I think Tawi Walker led the team in yards per carry. But, I think Gavin can come in and be that guy. And I think we're going to look up Eddie, and it's eventually going to be some sort of 1-2 punch. I don't know who that's going to be. It's probably going to end up being, the 2 guys that are most consistent. But I think Gavin gives them a whole new element to what they're doing in the running game, because right now I don't know if some of those guys have that breakaway speed. I think that Tawi Walker, obviously a short yardage type guy, very physical at the line of scrimmage. Marcus Major the same way, kind of can do it all. Javonte Barnes is super athletic, but is he going to break away for a big long run? We haven't seen it yet. So I think Gavin can really even help this running back room even more. And think about what we're talking about, Eddie. We're talking about 6 different running backs. That's a great problem to have. Again, it's kind of like the wide receiver room. Do they have a superstar? Do they have a Samaje Perine or Joe Mixon? I don't know. Maybe they do, and we just don't know it yet. But I think you look back at some of the best running back groups that Oklahoma's had, and it's been a Kennedy Brooks and a Trace Sermon, guys that you maybe not be superstars, but are guys that are really quality running backs, and you can kind of use both of them in the game.
DeMarco's done. I know that we've said it before, but what he's done at that running back room and kind of reshaping everything within the confines of the running back position at Oklahoma. And then when you remember what he has coming in next year,
Tatum.
I had trouble speaking there. That's my fault. Tatum, number one running back of the country, Xavier Robinson out of Oklahoma City, and then even Andy Bass, who I saw last week go for about, I think it was well over 400 yards of total offense.
Did you know he runs a 10.56 100-meter dash?
I mean,
Andy Bass.
He is
incredible.
extremely fast.
Yeah. For example, Gavin Freeman runs a 10.78. So
crazy.
That is insane.
It's crazy.
But yeah. And they're on the same relay team in high school.
I'll say it. Fast white boys. Fast white boys.
Yeah.
Here's the deal, though. Oklahoma offensively was extremely good. I think that they have a chance to continue to be extremely good, especially if you're getting out of Dillon Gabriel and everybody else around him. I think that you go into this weekend on Saturday, and the real question, George, is going to be what you can get out of this Oklahoma defense, because this is going to be the first time that I think that Team 129 has really been tested in a way that maybe can show some warts or something of what we've seen over the last couple years. That test, as Billy Embody talked about, with Preston Stone and a bunch of offensive players, Jordan Hudson, there's going to be opportunities for the Mustang. How's Oklahoma handle that is going to be the question.
Yeah, and it's up to really the secondary, I think, is going to be tested. You look back there, they're going to go after Woody Washington, Gentry Williams. I expect them to go at Gentry several times, being the young guy. I think you know what Woody's going to do. Woody's so consistent. He was really good against Arkansas State. Another guy that's just underappreciated at times at corner. But, those guys are going to get tested. What are they going to do when the ball's thrown their way? Because Preston Stone's going to push the ball down the field, and he's not always going to make the best decisions, but you got to make him pay for it. I mentioned that earlier. Same with Billy Bowman or Reggie Pearson. What do they look like back there? I'm also interested to see what Brent does schematically. I mean, we saw it last week on a couple 3rd and longs where they bring in an extra rusher, or maybe they bring in an extra defensive back. Maybe a Peyton Bowen gets to come in the dime package. Those sort of situations. What does that look like? But this secondary, that's to me, Eddie, kind of the big matchup is, can those guys make the plays? I mean, you saw it last year. Guys like Justin Broyles struggled at times. At corner, CJ Colden was a good player, made a lot of different plays towards the end of the year, but they struggled at that corner spot early in the season. So I'm interested to see, can this secondary that really we all think is more talented than they were last year, but can they not have those miscues, not have those busted plays, because that's where you get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
That's where the upsets happen is when you start having some of those busted plays and allow those mistakes to kind of overtake you.
Just as much as the good news is that Oklahoma's getting Gavin Sawchuk back on the offensive side of the ball, Oklahoma's getting R. Mason Thomas back on the defensive side of the ball. And, I find, as much as we talk about running back rotations and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how R. Mason Thomas fits back into the defensive end position. He flashed as a freshman at times. There's been a lot of talk about the pass rush as far as having opportunity within this game coming up on Saturday to get after Preston Stone.
Yeah, and the pass rush was the one concern, right? When you came out of that game was, why didn't they get after the quarterback? Well, I can tell you from what we've heard, R. Mason Thomas has been arguably their best pass rusher all of fall camp.
Yeah.
And that even goes back to spring ball. He's put on more weight. He looks really good. He's going to be back. I would imagine that's going to help Oklahoma when you can put an R. Mason Thomas across from a Trace Ford or a Rondell Bothroyd, two guys that were really close on Saturday. I mean, Rondell Bothroyd.
They were probably closer than people want to give them credit for, because they don't. It doesn't show up on any stat book, or it doesn't show up in any box score.
Right, and Rondell Bothroyd had the one where it was almost a strip sack.
Yeah.
That would have gone the other way. So I think that you add another guy like R. Mason Thomas, who really flashed at times last year as a true freshman. I think it's only going to help him. I think you're going to see maybe some more PJ Adebawore. He flashed at times. That he's still learning his position. I thought Ethan Downs had a pretty good game. You're going to see more of him. So I think that this is the week, though, that they really do need to get after Preston Stone. I mentioned earlier, secondary is going to get tested. Well, it makes the secondary's job a lot harder if Preston Stone's running for his life. And he's also he can really take off. So you can't just run up the field because he'll make you pay with his feet going up the field. So I think that they have to be really disciplined this week. And I do think that they'll maybe dial up some different stunts, twists, blitzes, whatever, to maybe get after him.
Well, and I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for those ends to win battles out on the outside against the tackles. You can do it with a lot of speed, and that's what Oklahoma has. Trace Ford had a couple of nice moves as well on Saturday against Arkansas State. But it's going to be up to the defensive backfield to kind of hold up their end of the bargain. Through one game, it was pretty good. Woody Washington was tested 5 times, didn't allow a reception. Here is a lot of Oklahoma defenders from the secondary, as well as Oklahoma defense coordinator Ted Roof talking about the challenges slowing down SMU.
Their quarterback's a guy that, that was his second start and is impressive. Stone moves in the pocket well, is a quarterback run threat, and at the same time can make all the throws. They had some big plays at receiver, a lot of speed, and the tight ends are really multi-dimensional, the receivers and their blockers. And then the running backs, I thought the depth at running back, they did, broke some big runs. They had Johnson ran for 124 yards on 14 carries, I think. So the ability to do both, to run the ball and then, take shots.
Really explosive. They got fast receivers. They recruited great in their in the transfer portal. So they got guys like Miami transfer running back Knighton. Their receivers fast, twitchy. They can make plays. They're going to take the shots. Like, they're going to give us 50-50 balls. But in my eyes, like, we got to make those plays. Like, we can't let them – it can't be called 50-50 balls. We got to have the higher percentage, in my opinion. So that's the DBs and what we're thinking. And so they're going to be high tempo, high run, high shots, and we just got to make plays. We can't give up big plays.
Just keeping the same like mentality, like, staying hungry. Like Coach V said that even like after practice, like our goal or our challenge is gonna be like how hungry and how humble we're gonna stay as long as the season go on. So like, and we take 1 week and we take our first game as our best game or our biggest game of the year. So like I just say like going out this week, just staying hungry, like even though honestly I think SMU is a great team, but like of course like politically people think that plus SMU versus OU and stuff like that. But like I feel like we don't take nobody no higher, no lower. Like we all keep the same standard. So I just say like just keeping the standard, staying hungry and staying humble about everything, regardless of who we play.
They're just more of like the moving, forcing us to communicate. I know they got a couple speed guys, things like that. But like I said earlier as well, we're pretty fast in every position. Linebacker ran 10-3, so like we can run, and any team that kind of like hangs on their speed shouldn't. So I feel like a lot of teams this year is gonna try to make us communicate more, like they did with OU last year. But just keep preparing with our communication and doing what we need to do.
Yeah, you got to play with good fundamentals. You got to understand the calls. You got to understand splits. You got to understand situation. And then you got to apply, the knowledge. Wisdom is the application of knowledge. So we give them the knowledge during the week, and then in all those situations when they're out there on the field on their own, they need to apply it. And, so nothing more than that. Of course, again, there's nothing easy about what I just said. So there's got to be a great process pre-snap, and then post-snap, they've got to do a great job at finishing plays. The ball's going to be in the air. They're going to pull up on their bus, and they're going to launch that football down the field. And our guys have got to do a great job of, straining, on the finish of routes.
Preston Stone goes 23 for 37, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns, a career high, 457 total yards of offense, and what was a ass-whooping last week. They were up 31-0 against Louisiana Tech, and I think that Peyton Bowen said it right there, George. There's going to be opportunities. There are times where Preston Stone has a tenacity to just kind of throw the ball up and let his wide receivers make plays, which is a good thing for SMU offensively, but it could be a good thing for Oklahoma to make a play on a football and create some turnovers.
Yeah, you go and watch that Louisiana Tech game, and there was multiple times that Louisiana Tech should have taken advantage of some of the passes that Preston Stone made. And Preston Stone's a good player, but you have to remember this is only, his real first year being a starter, and so he's going to make mistakes. And like Peyton Bowen said, it has to be a situation where they go make a play. And I do think Oklahoma will. And in fact, I'll predict, I think they get their first interception of the season this Saturday. I don't know who.
I was going to say.
I was supposed to say. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to go Billy Bowman.
Okay.
I think that he's a guy that obviously had a couple picks last year, is a really good ball hawk. I just think that Preston Stone's going to take some of those shots down the field, and Billy will be back there to make a play. But again, those are the balls. If OU's going to win this game and win this game handily, they have to make those plays. They have to make him pay. And I feel like I've said that a million times on this episode, but it's true. I mean, that's what it's going to come down to, is this secondary going out there and making those plays that they were just talking about.
I thought one of the items that you threw out there on, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, we were sitting up here at the office and you were looking at some of the PFF numbers from last week. And if you want to take one big major takeaway for what Oklahoma did defensively in week 1, they tackled really, really well.
Yeah, only had 3 missed tackles according to PFF. Last year, I looked back, they averaged about 13.2 missed tackles per game. So to have only 3, which would have been a season low a year ago, is pretty remarkable. And just for comparison, against UTEP last year, they had 13 missed tackles in the season opener. Then they turned around and had 22 missed tackles against Kent State in the second game. So that's remarkable improvement in terms of what they've been able to do fundamentally. Obviously, we'll see if they can continue to feel comfortable in this defense, and schematically, it seemed like the communication was really smooth. And you know, that part of that's playing Arkansas State. They didn't do a ton of tempo. SMU is going to go fast. So what does that look like? You know, what does the defense look like after maybe they give up a big play? You know, how do they get lined back up? Those sorts of things. I think we're going to find out a lot about Oklahoma this week, whether it's the defense being able to get stops against, you know, honestly, a talented offense, or the offense being able to keep pace and just continue that efficiency that we've seen so far.
You know, and I think Billy kind of talked about this during our interview, just as far as SMU has nothing to lose. They're walking in as a 16.5, 17-point underdog. Nobody really truly expects them to stay in the game, and I think that it's one of those kind of not necessarily scary situations, but they're going to throw the kitchen sink at Oklahoma, whether that be opening the game with an onside or faking a punt early or faking a field goal or any type of misdirection or throwbacks. I mean, I think that you could name it, and I'd say, yeah, I could see them trying that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also a group that, you know, I think that they feel like they have something to prove.
Sure.
You talk about where their program is right now in terms of going to the ACC next year. We heard Billy Embody talk about that. They feel like they should be able to hang with the Oklahomas of the world. And there's a lot of alumni at SMU that I think feel that way. So I think they're going to come in here expecting to compete, expecting to maybe even win. You know, I think that's the reality. Oklahoma, though, I know Kani Walker, some of the other guys talked about it. They just have to focus on Oklahoma, because if Oklahoma plays their best football, they're going to win on Saturday. And I believe that. They're the more talented team. They're a group that I think that has high expectations this year for themselves, and I feel like they also feel like they have something to prove.
It is kind of incredible too, and just talking with some of the players throughout the week, and I think that this has been a little bit of a vibe just starting throughout the month of August and then going into the onset of the season. You wouldn't get the feeling that this team is coming off of one of the most disappointing seasons in, you know, maybe the last 25 years of Oklahoma football.
No, and you know, I think they've talked about it a bit. You know, we heard earlier Andrew Raym say, hey, you know, we knew we fell short last year, and, you know, we have something to prove, but they're definitely good spirits. And, you know, part of that's they won 73-0, and they're feeling pretty good about themselves. But I think it's also just a product of, hey, the mindset is this is a new year. You know, we know the standard at Oklahoma. We fell short last year, and this year we're going to uphold that.
All right, let's just wrap things up here in the SMU preview show here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Injury updates. I know that we went over it during the Brent Venables show or post-press conference wrap-up on Tuesday. Drake Stoops, Deshaun McCullough, and I don't know why. Like, I think that you've really kind of effed with me on the pronunciation.
It's McCullough, right?
McCullough.
Yeah. I honestly don't know.
Well, now we don't. Now
we're both
know.
really bad at saying the names.
That's
I think
right.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah, comment on it. I don't care. But Drake Stoops, Deshaun, and Davis Beville. I wouldn't expect Davis Beville to play. I don't think he's going to be available for the next couple of weeks. You would hope that it doesn't come down to a third-string quarterback.
Yeah.
You can get General Booty in there if you really, really need to.
And his new underpants.
That would be interesting if he wore nothing else. Just a helmet and his underwear out there. Yeah. That would be quite the NIL statement. I think that even people, you know, what's the douchebag's name? Darren Rovell. I'm sure he would like that. But R. Mason Thomas, Gavin Sawchuk coming back. The three that I am really interested in to see if they are available this week, the two freshman cornerbacks in Makari Vickers and Josiah Wagner, and then on the back end at safety, Robert Spears-Jennings.
Yeah, and those are guys that could help them. And we just talked about the secondary and stepping up and making plays. I mean, Josiah Wagner, that's a name that we heard all fall camp. I mean, there's a lot of us that thought he was maybe going to start last Saturday. So, if they can get a guy like that back, Robert Spears-Jennings, who looks really good out there, Makari Vickers, it just gives them more bodies in that secondary that, if things start going the wrong way, you can start rotating them. Or, like I said, that competitive depth that all of a sudden you look up and they're feeling fresh going into that fourth quarter if the game is close. So I think it would be huge to have those guys back. But it's going to be huge to get R. Mason Thomas, Gavin Sawchuk. Those are the two to watch. I think having Drake Stoops, just his presence on the field, I think is a huge boost for the team. We'll see how healthy he is. He might be a little limited, but again, just having him out there, I think is going to be a huge help. I don't expect Deshaun to play. We saw him out on a boot on Tuesday. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. I don't know what kind of medicine they have over there. I'm sure the best, but I just don't know if it's worth throwing him out there to tweak that ankle.
If he doesn't play, cheetah position. I know that like in a game like this, if they're going to throw the ball all over the yard, you probably want somebody like a Justin Harrington doing that instead of Deshaun McCullough. Damn it. Defending people in space.
Yeah.
But maybe does that allow somebody like a Reggie Pearson to come down and play a little bit more cheetah? Does that allow somebody like a Peyton Bowen to get on the field more? That's all going to be something that we kind of find out together on Saturday at 5 o'clock when Oklahoma hosts SMU. Real quick, score prediction.
I'm going to take Oklahoma 48-28. I think that SMU hangs around. They're going to be able to score some points. That's the reality. If OU goes out there and puts together another shutout, I'll start talking about this team being I'll just start talking about this team not winning a national title, obviously, but going and winning a Big 12, I think is on the table. If they can go out there and do something like, even if they keep them to under 20 points, I think it'd be a very impressive performance. But I think Oklahoma's going to be able to score a lot of points. I think they pull away in the second half.
I'll go 51-27. Is that okay?
Yeah,
I think
we're about
I think Oklahoma covers, but then again, I'm an alumni, and that's what all alumni want to happen. So
also Lindsay Street, be there this week. I don't want to have to get mad again online.
I have talked to sources that tell me that there is early stage planning that they're going to be okay down there on the south side of the stadium. But we shall see. It's all up to you guys out there. It's going to be a really interesting week across college football. The big one down in Tuscaloosa with Alabama and Texas. Can Texas Tech and Baylor bounce back from embarrassing weekends in the first week of the season, losing up in Laramie, and then down in Waco to a Texas State team that just simply looked faster than them at times. Yeah. But Oregon and Utah, the two Pac-12 schools, going to Lubbock and Waco, and then Oklahoma State head out to Tempe to tangle in what is going to be supposedly 107-degree weather at kickoff out in the desert. So we have nothing to complain about back here at Norman. It's going to actually be pretty beautiful, low 90s during the day, and I would think a lovely evening on Saturday night as Oklahoma and SMU tangle at 5 o'clock. We will talk to you on the Eskridge Lexus postgame show. Make sure you're following all of us on Twitter, SoonerScoop.com as well. And right here, we'll be right here next week to kind of wrap everything up, as well as Friday night, a big announcement from defensive tackle Nigel Smith. He will be announcing where he's going to head to college. And, I think there's early indication that Oklahoma could be receiving good news on that front. So until next time, George Stoya, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you.